As we look this week at everyday objects, I thought I'd start with one of my favorite poems about everyday objects by Frank O'Hara. Oh, kangaroos, sequins, chocolate sodas, you really are beautiful. Pearls, harmonicas, jujubes, aspirins, all the stuff they've always talked about. Still makes a poem a surprise. These things are with us every day, even on beachheads and beers. They do have meaning. They're strong as rocks. And that is what we are doing this week. We're looking at everyday objects and making them, celebrating them, I guess, in the way to deserve. And so the movement we're looking at is the Edo period in Japan. And look at these amazing artworks by Shibata Zeishin, I believe his name is, where he took just everyday objects like fishing baskets and lacquer plates and wreaths, and he made them special by just giving them attention. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to pay attention to just everyday objects, and we're going to give them the attention and the celebration they deserve. And in the process, we are going to look at form. But there's been a long history of doing these everyday objects kind of paintings. This is Kibashe, who did just small little items. This is one of my favorite paintings ever, just a giant block of butter by Antoine Volant. Manet would just throw in some oysters. Emily Charmé would do her shoes, as Van Gogh did. Miriam, I think her name is Aslamazia. She was an Armenian painter, and look at this. This is another thing to think about when we paint tomorrow is look at the composition. She just crowds everything in there. Like, talk about crowding. So we're going to have multiple objects. You can do one object, you can do multiple. Patrick Caulfield was huge in the 90s. I'm sure he still is. But look at you could just play with light. You could play with color and shadow in the way he did and use your everyday objects as a way to experiment. Janet Fish did hyper realism. But her choice of objects is what makes her interesting, just like Warhol's, soup cans. The banality of it is what is interesting. And there's a long history of doing this. A Chicano artist from the 80s, painter named Mel Casas, did these amazing paintings where he politicized American culture by taking like everyday objects like brownies and mixing them with traditional symbols and important symbolism of Mexican culture. Contemporary artists are doing it too. Nikki Maloof does these amazing patterns, pattern upon pattern upon pattern. Nicole Dyer does these amazing, she's got famous like doing these LaCroix bottles and boxes of paper mache. But this could be something you could do. You might want to spend your whole time doing one object tomorrow. You might want to bring in an everyday object. Feel free, bring in if you have a favorite thing that you'd like to paint in your house. But it has to be just a common, mundane, banal thing that we are going to glamorize. Izzy Wood is one of my favorite painters. She's bonkers and does these are giant paintings of literally everyday objects. And then she also kind of twists them into scenes like this and motifs. She does a lot. There's a whole series of like up close of clothes like this. Joanna DeMay does like another. We could work on inserting some shapes and minimizing the shapes of the objects. You could abstract parts of your painting. But really, we are going to be thinking about form and how you want to paint form. So, it's a good opportunity to play with shadow and light, but feel free. I did include Catherine Bernhardt, who doesn't do really any form. She's very flat and 2D, but she's such a good example of how... Actually, that's not true, because these toilet paper, even though they're flat, she's given them form by tilting the top. So just playing with repetition would be really fun. Maybe you are going to take two of my objects and do a giant repeated thing. I will not have cheeseburgers, but if I did, you could do this. Eulala and May, I love their paintings. I think she just grabs her kids' stuff and her own stuff and puts them in front of her and then does these epic paintings. She's rep by Karma, and she's such a good painter. And there's just a lot that is said by this. It's not just simple. I mean, it's about motherhood and Americana and, everything. It's all in there, even though it's just simple objects. It's like the Frank O'Hara poem. They're simple, but whatever. So we're going to be looking at form. So form is created. I know a lot of you have been down this. I will include some other older videos have been down this road with light and shadow. So we're going to play with light and shadow tomorrow. And remember that really painting a form, which is turning something from 2D to look 3D, is all about capturing where the light hits it and where the shadows lay on it. I will send along, like I said, 2 other videos, and I will also be walking around to talk with anyone who wants to work specifically on form tomorrow. And remember, there are cast shadows and there are form shadows. Cast shadows are the shadows that an object makes, and the form shadows are the ones that like live on them. And so if that is one way to approach this. Another way is to think about, if you want to capture form, you can first work with a big shape and then add the little shapes inside. Just quickly did this on the plane. It's really bad, but basically if you're going to draw this, you could first just outline the biggest shapes, and the big shape of the bowl, the shape of the base of the mixer, the, whatever. And then to create form, you can start adding the smaller details and the shadows and light in other shapes. So you start with the big shapes and then you start adding little shapes. And so then I went in and made like little shadows, little bit of shapes, and you keep doing that until you have the final product. So I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be bringing in lots of everyday objects.